There is a mystery afoot, ladies and gentlemen, and you are a suspect. And so are we, here on Background Noise. I am your host, Joseph.
Joe.
And I'm Jack.
And I am not going to do that the rest of the episode, just like the last one. And welcome to Background Noise. Today we are going to be talking about the Kenneth Branagh directed films Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, which was just released recently. I almost said Murder on the Nile and Death on the Orient Express.
I didn't watch those.
Two different ways that someone died and two different locations that someone could die in.
Yes, those are well-known Christie Agatha novels, actually.
Christie.
I thought it was Christie Agatha.
Christie Agatha. Oh god.
Christie Agatha. I like it. Oh man.
Well, for those of you who might not be too familiar with either of these films, we do have a little synopsis that we're gonna run you through. But it should be noted that these were originally novels written by the famed 20th century author Agatha Christie. So go read those. I know it's reading, but go read them. And Joe, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, so both of these movies, and I'm going to be terrible with names. I remember Poirot. That is the only person's name I remember from the entirety of this duology that I've
the one that truly matters.
So I'm probably going to refer to people as that character that did the thing, or that character that did the thing. But both of these movies are about Hercule Poirot. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Hercule Poirot. Who is like he's a classic modern detective. And what I mean by that is he is really weird, he is really eccentric, he's got a bunch of quirks. In this case, he is OCD and he's obsessed with balance. I distinctly remember a scene in the opening of Murder on the Orient Express where he keeps sending people to go and get better eggs for his boiled egg breakfast because he's that meticulous and obsessed with detail. Murder on the Orient Express, it starts off with him solving a murder, I think somewhere in the Middle East. He solves a particular murder, and you get to see his skills in action. You get to see him deducing the clues in front of an audience of people about how everything plays out, and then he's actually set up the situation. I have a distinct scene where he's set up his cane in a wall so the criminal will run by as he's giving his rehearsal of who the criminal is, and the criminal hits his cane and gets knocked unconscious, and the police are able to catch him because of that. So it's setting up that he's this very meticulous guy. He can see all the pieces and he can plan everything ahead. And then because of some shenanigans, he ends up on a train called the Orient Express. And this is the first movie in Murder on the Orient Express, where his fellow passengers are Johnny Depp and 12 other people. And it's Johnny Depp is playing some guy who has a rough criminal history.
You get Johnny Depp, you get Ray from Star Wars, you get Aaron Burr from Hamilton, and you get Olaf from Frozen.
Oh god, that's right.
And you get Norman Osborn.
Of course.
And he is somewhat of a scientist himself. Literally.
He is somewhat of a scientist.
He is literally a scientist, or at least he's pretending to be one. Spoiler.
Yeah. Well, so he end up. Johnny Depp gets murdered one night on the Orient Express while the train is traveling, and then Poirot has to figure out who did it. And it turns out that all 12 of these people have a personal history with Johnny Depp's character, and they actually all 12 of them teamed up to murder him together. And there's a lot of him unraveling this. A large portion of this movie is him interviewing suspects and figuring out their backstory and figuring out what's going on with them. And so you get a very deep understand. You get as deep of an understanding of each of the 12 characters as you can get in a hour and a half, 2 hour long film. Mm-hmm. And then you get Death on the Nile, which is similar setup. Poirot is invited. He's in Egypt where he meets a friend of his. The friend invites him to come to a wedding party, I believe, or a honeymoon party, something like that this guy is invited to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the individual the person who's hosting the party is Gal Gadot. She's getting married to some random British guy, and then she sees that Poirot is there, and she's like, "Hey, by the way, the random British guy, his past fiance keeps stalking us, and I think she's going to try to murder one of us. Could you just actually join the party as opposed to just kind of crashing our party and come along with us and figure out what's happening?" And he's like, "Sure, I guess I'll come along with you guys because I love mysteries. Not because I like you, but because I like mysteries." And then you get a few near misses. You get some near death experiences, and then the actual murder happens. Gal Gadot gets killed, as she predicted, because Poirot was drunk, I believe, so he wasn't able to protect her. And then he has to figure. Now, once again, and this all is taking place. The honeymoon is taking place in Egypt, hence Death on the Nile. And then he has to a significant portion of the movie is him interviewing suspects, figuring out what this one has a bit more, if I remember correctly, there is much more interviewing of suspects, or at least figuring out people's backstories before the death occurs, as opposed to a Murder on the Orient Express, which I think is it's all after the fact. He's all interviewing people after the guy got killed. Death on the Nile, it's kind of 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it does as good of a job as fleshing out each of these characters as you could hope to do in the 2-hour-long time frame of the movie. This time, you actually get a few different people that are murdered because they have information, and the killers figure out that they have information before Poirot figures out what the information is, and so they're murdered as well. And then it turns out that the guy who was marrying the wealthy woman
Gal
who got
Gadot.
murdered, the guy who was marrying Gal Gadot, he and his former fiance are actually still in love with each other, and they plan to murder his now wife, together for, I can't remember what exactly the reason was.
For money.
Yeah, is it just for money?
I thought so.
Pretty much,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I figured as much, but I wasn't actually sure. So yeah, they basically plan to murder her together, and then it turns out that the girl is significantly crazier than the guy, and when they're cornered, she kills them both. Like she pulls him in for a hug and then puts a gun to his back and shoots him and herself through him, and then they fall.
To be strong.
True love.
Yeah, true love wins out, apparently. And then they die in each other's arms, and it's romantic and also really morbid.
There is no justice here.
Yeah, exactly. And then we end the movie with Poirot having shaved off his mustache, because apparently he grew a mustache to hide scars on his face because of his lover back in France back during World War I, and he shaves it off because he is over her, maybe? And maybe this is setting up a sequel where he's pursuing a romantic interest. I don't know.
It's either that or he's given up detectiving because he is pursuing the love interest. But either way, it is a little unclear, but not in the fun way either. It's not like, oh wow, it could be that. It's just like, all right, what does this mean? It's like, you didn't, you gave us a throwaway line, and then there's that. But anyway, that's
yeah. It could go either way. It could go either way, because they could make a sequel if there's money to be made, but if this one doesn't do super well, they could just end it here.
Oh yeah.
Yep. That's exactly how it ends. Yep.
I feel like they're running out of vehicles for the movies to be set on, so
Mm-hmm. Well, they're also running. We also have a limited number of synonyms for death, so we could have bludgeoning on the Boeing 747. I don't know. Is there a famous
bloodshed in the air? There actually is a novel that's like dead in the air or something.
Okay,
well, that's basically what happens in the movie Non-Stop from Liam Neeson, where he's like on an airplane. I don't know if you saw that one, but that's pretty much what happens there. It's like people keep dying, and they will keep dying unless Liam Neeson transfers all this money over or something like that. So,
it's called Death in the Clouds.
Death in the Clouds. There are. I just looked up. There are 33 novels in the Poirot series by Agatha Christie.
Yeah, so they apparently they definitely don't like source material.
I'm gonna take a. You guys continue. You can talk about your thoughts on the movie. I'm gonna look to see what all the weird names that they have are.
Oh, all right. Well, in that case, yeah. Well, I'd say we should start out with Death on the Orient. There it is. I said it again. Murder on the Orient Express. Considering that it's the first chronologically taking place in 1934, it was also released, and it was also released earlier in 2017. It is the second film adaptation of this particular Christie novel. Let's see. The first one, Jack, you watched the first one. It was 74. Was the first one?
I think it was 78. I could be wrong though.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, this is there's definitely been a lot of changes between 1978 and 2017, and well, I'd say the first apparent one is just the fact that this has a very visually interesting, of course, but also kind of a visually flashy film. The Orient Express itself, like the train, I mean, considering that we spend 2/3 of the film there, of course it's gonna have a lot of attention to detail put into it, and a lot of good things put into the sets for that. But I was just a big fan of the settings for both of the films, honestly. And well, even though I kind of felt like the Death on the Nile was a little more set dressing than anything, like Egypt was kind of the background. I feel like just the fact of being in the snowy Alps, and with the train being stuck in the snowy Alps, so that's also a good way. You're gonna hear a lot of things. It's like, oh, it's a good way for a good logical way for these people to still be here, and for the murderer, or spoilers, murderers, not to make their escape or anything. It's like, yeah, no, you can't go anywhere. You're on a snowy mountain and stuff like that. And I feel like that just is another thing that highlights just Agatha Christie's ability to write very, very tight stories. Unlike some of the things added in this one, not too much was added in the first one, and well, we'll bring up a little bit of that when I got a little segment about adaptations. But there's, of course, translating a novel to a film, you're gonna have to do some stuff to get it on the screen and not be just like endless dialogue or whatever. But yeah, there was some changes where you could tell that the screenplay wasn't nearly as tight as the original novel's like story. But I would say they're few and far between in Orient Express. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say watching both and I actually checked, you were correct, Joseph, was 74. That's when the original came out. So one thing in particular I thought was interesting comparing the original to the new one was, in the original, they definitely put in a lot of effort to make sure we see Poirot interview each person on the train. I feel like they put a lot of effort in for that. Whereas in the newer one, while he may do it, I cannot remember him interviewing everyone. I think he interviews most of them, a good chunk of them, but I feel like not only does he not interview everyone, but when he has the final confrontation with everyone at the end to say what he's discovered and all that, he brings up clues that we never saw him find, and he just throws them out there. And it's like the whole point of a whodunit, I would think, in a mystery, is for every piece should be there. Whether or not you solve it is up to you. Whereas I feel like a lot of the pieces in Murder were not given to us, and were sort of just told us by Poirot at the end there. It's like, well, you didn't really give us a chance, did you? So.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the big twist character, well, we've already gone into spoilers, but I mean, spoiler alert for the end of the Murder on the Orient Express. I think the biggest one is, like you're saying, is the big twist character that Ms. Hubbard is The I can't remember the
The
name.
mom?
Yeah, the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, Linda Arden, the pilot's mother. And it's like, yeah, that was the biggest thing. It's like Poirot is just like, yeah, I figured you were her, even though it's like, even though the plot does kind of revolve around the fallout of this family, it's like we were not given any clues at
Yeah.
all. It's just, it was very, that felt like more of a movie like twist rather than a book twist. And fortunately, I haven't read Murder on the Orient Express. I know it's kind of hypocritical of me to advocate other people to read it, but I mean, I'm going to eventually, but but it's like, yeah, that one was a little unnecessary, not unnecessary, but a little out there. A little out there's probably a good thing. Not very good for your murdery mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say, just in general, both these films, I did think Branagh as Poirot was excellent. With watching the original one in '74, you have a guy named Albert Finney playing him, and while he's fine, he plays almost a more like cartoony, ridiculous version, like a lot of like over the top stuff, like including the accent. He's got the really like slicked back, greasy hair, and I mean, I don't think the point wasn't to take him seriously, and I assume that was the point, and if that was the case, it worked because it didn't. He just seemed kind of goofy, but also smart at the same time. I just feel like the goofy kind of overshadowed his brilliance and didn't really work for me, even if that was a more faithful version of the character. I honestly don't know since I haven't read the book either. But I thought Branagh's Poirot, struck a very good balance where he had some funny moments and he was humorous at times, but he was also, you could tell he was very serious, a very good detective, and that shone through. It was a great balance I found for both. So
Yeah, Branagh did a
Yeah.
very good job of switching on detective mode.
yeah, he also easily had the best mustache of the two. So
Well, that's important, right? A good mustache can make up for a lot of character flaws.
it goes a
So,
long way.
Oh yeah.
I do also appreciate, like, we do see. I can't remember as much of this in Murder on the Orient, but I did appreciate like the start off in Death on the Nile. It gives you a flashback to when Poirot was in World War One, I believe. I'm assuming with France, right? Serving in World War One in the trenches, and there's a time where, um, what is it? Something like they have been given instructions to go and make a charge, and the captain says, "Oh, we're going to need to go as soon as the weather turns." And he says, and Poirot is in the team, and he says, "No, we need to go now because the wind is about to turn now because he has just figured these things out." He's not trying to be a detective. He's not trying to be this great person who solves mysteries. He's just a really observant person living his life, and he sees these kinds of things. So you understand how this guy with the right motivation can become a great detective. And also the actor plays it very well. Of like, this is a guy with some quirks. He's a person, he's a human being, he's a real person with a lot of quirks. He's not a cartoon, right? He's not a ridiculous caricature. He is a person who actually probably has gone through some amount of trauma and has these quirks as a way of regulating that trauma. Which that's how I interpreted it, especially in the second one.
Yeah.
I would say definitely since he's gone, them adding his little bit of backstory going through the Great War and whatnot, it definitely does have that. But I would say that my favorite performance out of him comes from the first act of Murder on the Orient Express, because he strikes the balance perfectly before he goes full detective mode. It's like the little moments where he meets with I think it was Johnny Depp's character. Johnny Depp's character meets with him and is like, "Hey, I need you to watch my back" or something, and you can almost see him in like his facial performance, almost like suss out that, oh yeah, this is the guy, or he almost gets like little inklings of this might be the guy that I'm I'm trying to word it well because it's really complicated. The guy who could be the guy who killed uh, Daisy Armstrong, which is the whole reason, pretty much the whole reason this little plot gets kicked off. It's like he almost figures it out
Yeah.
before he gets murdered, but him getting murdered kind of solidifies some things. And I also like that a little bit after that he's just reading like a Charles Dickens novel and like giggling like a little schoolgirl. It's hilarious because it seems like this guy's supposed to be like a serious detective, and it's like, you know, it's funny. And then I think in Death on the Nile they go it's almost like, you know, they might have gotten a note that's like, I don't know, that was a little too ridiculous, why don't we tone him down a little? And it's like, because the only real eccentricity that we get out of him in Death on the Nile is probably from him with the little desserts in the opening scene. And then it's almost like, oh yeah, you know him well enough. It's like, no, give us a little more of that before you give us the deathly serious stuff. It's a good appetizer, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'd actually. We're gonna say.
I was gonna say, it just reminded me of I don't know if you guys have ever read Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Nope.
In it, everyone knows the characters in Dracula, but people who haven't read it don't actually know what the characters are about. There is crap, I'm forgetting the guy's name. It's Helsing. No, it's not Helsing. It's
Van Helsing.
Something else. Yes, Van Helsing. Yeah, yes. the vampire hunter. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was right. Of course, I'm right.
Of course.
Van Helsing is the vampire hunter, and I think most modern interpretations of Dracula make him like the super cool vampire hunter dude. He is a quirky professor. He is Poirot in Dracula. Like, that is who Van Helsing is. He is a really quirky, weird guy that has a bunch of like eccentricities. Until vampire stuff starts happening, and then suddenly he like transforms into the very serious, this is what we need to do, this is a problem, I know what needs to be done, this is how we're going to solve the problem. And I think Joseph saying like they kind of cut out the eccentricities in Death on the Nile is like, it's the version, it's Bram Stoker's Dracula, Van Helsing versus modern interpretations of Van Helsing. Like, ooh, yeah, he's supposed to be a quirky character, and we'll put a little bit of quirky in him, but we're not actually going to show you any of this anymore. It's like, he's a little quirky. All right, let's go on.
He's the cool guy now.
Yeah, he's the cool guy now. He's so cool. Look at him get angry at people. Look at him be all serious about things. Oh yeah. He's so cool.
He's a cool kind of quirky.
Yes.
Yeah, he do be quirky.
He doesn't wear his mustache protector anymore. That's how you know he's serious now.
Oh God, that's right.
Now he's taking things seriously.
Yes.
That was one thing I did appreciate, the mustache protector, because that was in the original as well. So that was a nice touch. I liked that.
Yeah.
And well, since we've gone on about a Poirot so much, which rightfully so, this is definitely Kenneth Branagh's movie, and he does it very well. But let's talk about our supporting cast. Who are some standouts to you guys? We've kind of gone on from separating murder and death. Let's just talk about all of them. What are your favorite standouts?
Well, I think not every single, but half of the actors in Murder on the Orient Express are very well known British or just global acting celebrities, right? Mm-hmm. Like it is a star-studded cast.
Yep.
I didn't recognize as many faces in Death on the Nile. Obviously, Gal Gadot, like very famous, popular actress now. Not quite as many that I can think of. Not that there weren't others. Maybe I just missed it. So my point being like, everyone is bringing their A game. So you guys maybe you guys have specific people that you like more than others.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think everyone that I can think, I can't think of anybody who gave a bad performance in particular. I thought everyone was fine. let's see. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm not necessarily a Josh Gad fan, but I thought his character was fine. I thought he did a good job with what he had. William Dafoe was good. The girl who plays not Gal Gadot, but the other girl who ends up murdering people, I hadn't seen her in anything. And I thought she was good.
Ooh, I'm trying to remember her because she has been in a couple different things, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's the first time I've seen her in something, so I thought she was good there. Army Hammer, everyone's favorite cannibal. I thought he was good in it. And who else? I know you, Latita Wright, who's known as Black Panther's younger sister Shuri in the Marvel movies.
Yes.
She was very good. One character, I don't know if he was in the original or not, but Poirot's friend Book. I thought was very good. I liked the addition of him, and I liked the chemistry that he and Poirot had. So I don't know if I've seen that actor. I may have seen him in something, I can't remember. But that character, I enjoyed getting to see him in these two movies.
Oh yeah, Book was a very good audience surrogate, and he was. Once we get into the adaptation thing, I'll talk a little bit more about him. But yeah, I enjoyed his performance. One I didn't really expect, which Joe, you brought up like famous British actors and whatnot. Russell Brand. Russell Brand is the doctor, the doctor in Death on the Nile, and yeah, I think this is the first time I've seen him in a big serious role in a while, and I thought he did really good. He was, I can see that some people might say his performance might have been like stilted, but I think that's entirely the point. He's like holding in his pure emotions of the fact that his former fiance is getting married, and for some reason she invited him.
That's just cruel.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it turns out that everyone that was invited on purpose.
Right.
Everyone who is invited are people who are potential suspects. It's actually a reverse. Now that I'm thinking about it, Death on the Nile is a reverse of murder, because murder, all 12 people are actually guilty.
Right.
And then on Death on the Nile, the now husband invited a bunch of people who are all very reasonable suspects for why they would want to kill Gal Gadot.
Yep.
Like,
right.
All of these people have at least a potential for a personal vendetta against her, or they're the maid, right? So they have to be there.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects.
Right.
So, which is a niece. It's a nice little twist. That was
nice little twist. That should have been Poirot's accent. They should have taken a little more creative liberties there.
It's a nice little twist. Can you imagine him giving the dialogue, the breakdown of who the suspects are at the end, using that voice?
And you.
Gosh.
Oh man.
Yeah, let's see. There was one other. I gotta pull through my notes now. Let's see. There was one other thing I was going to bring up. It's like, it wasn't necessarily a bad performance, I suppose, but I don't know. You could kind of tell that. I'm trying to find exactly. Was it the jazz singer? You could tell a little bit that the jazz singer was not originally one of the characters from the book, and not because of like any overt reasons, but it almost seems like that. Well, originally her character, I did a little research. Originally her character is like Salome Otterborn is just like one of the Doyle's, like Simon Doyle's, like socialite friends or something, and then that character got converted sort of into this jazz singer character, which is fine. It's fine. I thought her performance was good, but you can kind of tell that she was kind of just put there to give Poirot another subplot.
Sure, yeah, she definitely wasn't in the original. Both that whole dynamic between she and Poirot, as well as the whole origin story, was not in the original as well. I don't know if the origin story was something in the books or not. It might have just been an original thing Branagh came up with. That being said, though, I don't necessarily think it took away from the film. I thought it was just something different that I thought was fine.
Well, there are 39 books in the Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot series, so presumably one of them has his origin story in it.
The first,
You would think.
the first case of Poirot.
Well, the book 38 of 39 is Poirot's early cases, so presumably that's where he like starts solving mysteries. She's like,
there you go.
we're at the end of this. We're at the end of the series. I should probably explain how this character came about.
Yeah.
While we're going along, why don't we just look into this?
Yes. Indeed.
Now, let's see. I think another relevant thing to bring up, other than like the cast and whatnot, and is the crew. It's directed by Kenneth Branagh, and well, you'd think it'd be like some sort of thing where he's like this. It's some sort of ego thing where it's like, oh yes, I directed and I'll star in it. But we've already talked about his performance as Poirot as great, and as director, I think he does a pretty good job too. And he's teamed up with like a familiar partner in was for the screenplay for this film, Michael Green, and then of course Ridley Scott's with the project as well. So definitely a star-studded cast, a star-studded production team. But I find it kind of funny that was it Braun, Green, and Ridley Scott lately. Unfortunately, love you, Ridley, but lately they've been a little bit of hit or miss in terms of the stuff they do. But I think they all came together to do two very good hits.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely enjoyed both. I definitely think I liked Death on the Nile a little more, just personally. I just found it to be more of a mystery, but I definitely thought both were good. Both looked very good, and both were well done overall, in my opinion. So,
I'm a very much yes. I watch Murder on the Orient Express for the visuals and Death on the Nile for the mystery. But yeah, that's they're definitely able to do a pretty good adaptation. And well, speaking of adaptations, this brings me to a very, very interesting to me question, I suppose, that I've got for you two fine fellows. Let's see. Of course, book to film adaptations are nothing new. So let me ask you, how do you like your adaptations? How close to the source material do you like them? Do you like to get it as close as you can? Of course, there's going to be a little bit of changes just for film, like we were talking about earlier. Get as close as you can, or do you like something along the lines of Death of the Nile, where it's like, they combine characters, they might, transform one to give the other characters a little something more to work with, which I think worked out well. They might include other characters like that weren't in the other novels, or like weren't in the novels, or had a minor role. Like they bumped that up a little, like they did with Book. Right. What's your flavor?
I think it kind of depends on what I'm watching and what my relationship is to the IP. It's like if I'm watching something like Harry Potter, I love Harry Potter. I want the film adaptation or the TV show adaptation or the video game adaptation, or what have you. I want that to be as accurate as possible. If it's something that I have a low level of interest in, and the reason is because I really love the original, so I want more of the original, basically.
Makes sense.
As opposed to if it's something where I'm like, oh yeah, this is a cool thing. I've heard about this. This is kind of neat. In that case, I would want the adaptation to be as good as possible, for the new medium. Like, if there are changes that you can make to a movie versus in a book, because there are changes, right? Because now you have a score, now you have the visual effects, now you have limitations on casting, now you have limitations on set design and things like that.
Mhm.
So I'm more, if it's something that I don't have a personal relationship with or I don't care that much about, then I want the person making a movie to make as good of a movie as possible, just like I want the person writing the book to be writing as good of a book as possible, which might not be the exact same story.
Yeah, I think pretty much the same thing with Joe, where it really depends on your relationship with the series or the IP. Because if you have very little association with it and you don't know much about it, then I feel like no matter what your encounter is with it, that if it's a good story overall, you'll be okay. But if you have just want to use Harry Potter for an example again, like me for example, I've not read any of the books, so going into the movies, I love the movies. It's one of my favorite film franchises, and I think they're great. Now, if I had read the books first, there might have been a lot of things that I did not like, and I might not see the films as I might not appreciate them as much. So that's just one example. But it also, going back to what Joe was saying, it also, with films, sometimes things in books don't translate as well to movies, so they have to make up for that, and you have to appreciate it as its own thing. One of those, Dune is probably a good example of that, where they couldn't translate everything, but how they did it worked very well in the context of a movie.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
my thought would be, in general, when it comes to adaptations, you should be able to make it as close to the original as possible, but you can take creative liberties if it is going to enhance that medium better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I also will add a little caveat on there as well, which is that my degree of acceptance of a change is dependent on the spirit in which the change is made.
Mm.
So
That's
if someone is saying if there are technical limitations and they say, look, the book has 100 characters in it, and we don't have the budget to get 100 good actors to play 100 good characters. So we're gonna cut some characters and smush some people together to make time for this in the movie. Or if you say, we there are technical limitations on the filming of this, or we need to cut some stuff out for making it fit within the runtime of a movie. That all makes sense. But if you say, oh, well, if I could do this, I would have made these changes because this story is almost good, but my little touch is going to make it that much better. That's where I get a little annoyed because I'm not here to see your ideas. I'm here to see this thing that I like brought to film, right? Or whatever the adaptation is. So if you're making changes because it improves the art creation, great. If you're making changes because you're like, oh, this isn't good enough for me, so I want to make it better for me, that's where we have a problem.
I've waited 15 years to be able to adapt this, and now I'm finally going to do it the way I want.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's
It's
usually a bad sign.
It's not the time for directors to be making fan films.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I would say that the Dune was an excellent example of a good adaptation in terms of just it. Dune's a big book. Dune's a big book, and of course, some things are going to have to change. But it definitely felt like the spirit was completely intact, and I would say that the same would kind of go for these. I like it as long as the spirit's intact, as long as it doesn't become a vanity project. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. Vanity project is the word. as long as it doesn't become like a vanity project, like you're saying, Joe, and as long as a change is made to, like you said, serve the art, or to maybe, if you are gonna add something that's not just so it's easier to do on film, then definitely make sure I don't know, you look at the material itself to make sure it's either in the spirit of the character, even if you have the author, which I mean you can't really do for stuff like Lord of the Rings or is Dune's author is not alive, is he? But either way, but
I don't
if you can like go maybe like directly to them, or like was it like Mike Flanagan did with some of the Stephen King adaptations, like Doctor Sleep and whatnot. He went directly to Stephen King. It's like, all right, this is what I want to change. He's like, okay, no, that sounds pretty good, stuff like that. And yeah, I would say those are some pretty good takes. And I'm gonna pull all of these sound bites for if and when we review Rings of Power. Just saying. No, no.
Yeah. Well, I already have thoughts on Rings of Power, and it hasn't even come out yet. So,
But yeah, aside from that, there is also one more thing that I wanted to bring up. It's not really a question as much as it is just kind of putting it out there a little bit. But this movie was released in 2017, and I would say that 2017 was a prominent part of what I like to call the CGCU, or the cash grab cinematic universe.
yeah.
And so what is it? Some of you might know what I'm talking about. It's the same year that gave us the new Mummy, like the Mummy 2017 with Tom Cruise and his, all that. And of course, it was meant to be the start of Universal Studios' Dark Universe Cinematic Universe film series. Try saying that 3 times fast. But yeah, and it also doesn't stop there. Was it the same year gave us the infamous Justice League movie, which that's a little bit more of a technical inclusion on the list. It didn't really jumpstart it, but it was the culmination of 2 movies set up, so it might as well have been the start. And then also gave us the Dark Tower movie, that one King Arthur movie with that no one remembers. The fact that when I was looking up like for similarities, I didn't even remember it was there. And yeah, it was an odd year. The point in me bringing this up, other than haha, look, it's the Mummy, it was a bad movie, is that I kind of feel like
Which is a good point.
oh yeah, no, yeah, very good point. Horrible. There's a connection. Mummy, Egypt, Death on the Nile, Egypt. It's all connected. It's all connected. The point is, I feel like that maybe this series it didn't need a cinematic universe, even though was it Brannigan really kind of thought about it. It's well, I wouldn't consider these in like a cinematic universe if they only share like 1 or 2 characters, because at that point it's just kind of like, is Knives Out its own cinematic universe with its upcoming sequel? But that's beside the point. I feel like maybe between Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, there should have been maybe another Agatha Christie adaptation. Of course, I mean, we don't want to oversaturate the murder mystery market or whatever, but there maybe should have been one, because Murder feels like the beginning of a trilogy in terms of setting everything up with our familiar characters. The fact that Book is in both is, very much trilogy material or whatever. And Death on the Nile feels like an end point. It feels like the ending of a trilogy. But there's no middle point, which kind of makes all these, I guess you could put payoffs in air quotes, like these payoffs in the last film of like Book's Book kind of like having this send off where it's like, oh, I've changed. I've only ever wanted to be this goofy guy, and it's like, okay, you were goofy in the first one, and it's like then you got this whole it doesn't look like a big change because all you were just there for a little bit in the first one. Well, I mean he's there throughout, but he doesn't get developed a lot in the first one. Is what I mean.
It almost feels like, I actually agree exactly with what you're saying. It almost feels like Murder on the Orient Express is, here's the character, setting you up, here's the status quo of this character. And there should have been a movie where he gets involved in a murder of some kind, and in some way he fails. He fails, and it's because of his quirky nature. He fails. He makes mistakes because he's being OCD about things, and it prevents him from being able to like figure things out. And then in Death on the Nile, now he's like in exile in Egypt, and his friend is like, "Here's a chance to redeem yourself," and brings him in, and now he's lost. He's grown up a little bit because of this. He's lost some of that, and that would explain why he's not as quirky, he's not as weird, he's not as eccentric here. And then it closes off a trilogy where there is loss because he loses his friend. Spoiler alert: Book dies in that one. But it's like, okay, we've gotten to know this character. We watched him grow. We watched him crash. We watched him come back up to like into a bittersweet conclusion, and where he's like, okay, I have redeemed myself by solving this murder, but this isn't what I want to do anymore. That would have been a great trilogy, and we've got the first and the last piece of that trilogy.
Well, when you think about it, if we're going to use the last 3 movies of the Star Wars trilogy, you take out 8, and 7 and 9 don't seem as terrible, even though they are. They don't seem as terrible when you have 8 taken away, because 8's what ruined everything.
That's fair. If they don't have a good idea for the middle of the trilogy, then I would prefer them not to make it. So that is fair. It's just, I do agree with Joseph that it feels like they're setting up, they were trying to make a trilogy, but they didn't.
Yeah, it seems like they resolved things that maybe weren't ready to be resolved yet.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And I do think it's really funny that I'm always a fan of obvious sequel bait that goes nowhere. And to be honest, when I first watched Murder on the Orient Express, it was like a year after it came out, and then it's like, oh yes, there was a murder or like a death on the bloody Nile, and it's like, oh wow, I was like, yeah, I can't wait for that to happen. And then it was like, and then it was a year after that, and a year after that, it's like, well, add that to the list. But then I realized now it was delayed because of the big coup and the stuff coming out about Army Hannibal actual cannibal.
Hannibal.
And but yeah, that makes a little more sense from the delay. But yeah, I just kind of figured I'd bring that up as like, but definitely agree with you, Jack, in terms of, listen, if you don't have a good idea or don't have a good plan, or we haven't found like Agatha Christie's 3rd most popular book or something, like, yeah, definitely don't do it.
Yeah. Here's a wild idea. Why don't studios, if you're listening, I know that we have a huge audience of big studios that love listening to us. So
yes,
here's my pitch to you. Make good stories. And if those good stories work well when they fit together across movies, tell these good stories and let them fit together across movies. And then if you keep doing that and you keep making good stories that all fit well together, people will want to watch because you're telling good stories. It's a radical idea. I know it's crazy. It's never been done before, except for literally everyone who told stories before, like 10 years ago, before 2008. So that would be 13 years ago, right?
Yeah.
14?
Yeah.
14 years ago. Right, because Iron Man, right? Iron Man is the thing that broke this. Except it's not. It's Avengers that broke this, right? Because Avengers earned it.
Yeah.
They made a bunch of good... Well, they made some good stories and they made some okay stories.
They put in the effort, though. They put in the time.
They put in the effort and then they made it work. As opposed to everyone else is like, oh, well, we want the payoff without putting in the work. Now, like, look, Agatha Christie mysteries, sure, go ahead and just put all of those on the big screen if there are good ones. I don't know how many of them are actually good because that's not something that I bothered to read before this. But yeah, this is the problem with this. There are problem with adaptations, which is you putting your ideas into something where they don't belong, and there's a problem with sequelization cinematic universes, which is put in the work before you start make the good stories and then make them a series.
Because then the money will start flowing in without you having to put in so much effort just to push a sequel out.
Yep.
So what you're saying is hashtag revive the Agatha Christie murder mystery cinematic universe.
Well, I don't think it's technically died yet. The movie's just come out.
Yeah, the movie just came out.
We're bringing it back. We're bringing it back, boys. It's release the ACMCU.
Release the Christie cut.
Release the Christie gun. Oh man.
Oh yeah.
4 hours of Kenneth Branagh's Poirot just contemplating.
Reading novels, going on,
Yes,
inspecting eggs.
exactly.
The average day in the life of Hercule Poirot. But anyway, it does look like we are getting a little low on time. So how about we just go through quickly some of your favorite moments, like favorite shots, favorite scenes, favorite interviews, like favorite interviews between both movies, maybe.
Favorite shots, like with a gun.
Camera, gun, either or. I could go with either, as long as neither are pointed at me.
There's I think this is in Murder. Yeah, it's on Murder. It's in Murder on the Orient Express. I think it's the scene where he's confronting he's got the all 12 murderers on a table, like, and so it's shot to look like the Last Supper on purpose. Like so he's trying to find Judas in the Last Supper among the apostles, right? And then he says, after framing the shot to invoke that imagery, he then says something to the effect of, you plan your plans and you plot your murders and you think no one will know, but two people will know, God and Hercule Poirot. Which is a little bit pretentious, but also an excellently delivered line and an excellently delivered scene.
Line, yeah.
Speaking of that, there's a line in Death on the Nile where somebody asks him, like, and who are you exactly? And he's like, I'm Poirot, and I'm probably the greatest detective in the world, because he's like, he knows he is, but there's always the off chance that somebody else could be better. And so, like, or like at that same level. So he's like, just to be safe, I'm going to say that. But as far as like camera work, I can't remember if they do this as much as Death on the Nile, but I do like Branagh's Dutch tilts he does when he films. And also, there's this long take he does in Murder on the Orient Express with the train, which is fun. Like, immediately, like when Poirot enters the station, I think, when he starts walking to the train to when he gets in his room, it's something like that. It's like, it's a very long take, and you get to see all of the other passengers on the train. It looks like one shot, and so that's pretty cool. And it's us getting to see both the characters for the first time and the train itself. So
yeah, that one in particular was really cool. Just, the fact that it kind of takes you by surprise that, oh yeah, we're going by all the cabins and we're seeing all these people as Poirot passes by them and meets them kind of for the first time. It's like, oh wow, they're doing that. They definitely do that a little bit better than what is it, the little exposition thing in the like when everyone's finally together and Book's like, oh yeah, let me introduce you to everyone. It's like, that guy over there. It's like, I definitely like that a lot better. And from Murder as well, like when he's after he's been shot by Burr, ironically enough, what is it? After that, he's sort of like got the crew that's digging them out. Is like, he confronts them. It's like, I need you all to leave the train. It's like shot underneath the train car, and then like you see that he's like brandishing like the revolver and whatnot. And that was a cool one where you can like see them like reacting to him. Like, pretty sure they think he's like some kind of psycho or whatever. And that's a cool shot to me. And I would say kind of the little, also from Murder, I got a lot of stuff from Murder that I liked, but for some reason can't remember too much about Nile. But anyway, like the little thing where it's like he reveals that you all did it, and then there's like that kind of dreamscape of them all in black and white watching like the Armstrong like family reel. I just thought that was kind of interesting and really kind of just really cool. It's like, I wish that Death on the Nile was a little more not whimsical, but took a little more. I don't know. It's an outlandish premise. It's like everybody's on a boat and everybody's got something to do with it. It's like, I mean, I don't want to say be Knives Out again, but there was a lot of they did a lot with like the kind of not campy. It wasn't campy. I can't find my words. The kind of outlandish premise of like everyone's everyone's a suspect or whatever. And it's like, oh, they injected their own little bits of style, which, well, I suppose they can get away with it because I mean, this is Agatha Christie. She invented the everyone is a suspect thing.
Yeah.
Well, not exactly, but popularized it and does a lot with it. But yeah, yeah. Oh, I also like the fact that there's an electric guitar in 37?
Oh, that's right. With the the jazz singer.
Yeah, the jazz singer. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess it makes sense.
And it also made sense that when Burger shot, or sorry, Leslie Odom Jr.'s character shot Poirot, he didn't kill him, so technically it's Burr throwing away his shot again.
Once again, every time.
Can't catch a break.
He can't keep getting away with it.
And also, it's kind of funny that you have. I don't know why I'm thinking of Murders, because I do like. I think I do like Death on the Nile more overall as far as the overall mystery. But I do remember in Murder, you have Poirot chasing Olaf through a snowstorm. That seems appropriate.
Oh, yeah. There's that too. It's stuff like that that makes me wonder: is Kenneth Branagh just troll? Was he just trolling everyone? It's like, yeah. I need the guy from Frozen. It's set on a mountain. I need him, and I need Leslie Odom Jr. because the character shoots my character. No, it's gonna make sense. Just get everyone you can.
He went into the shop with a very specific list of requests, and the guy behind the counter was like, I mean, yes, we can find these, but are you sure? And yes, absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Trust me.
Well, I would say we've definitely gone through them. I just generally, I would say it's decent adaptation. I mean, all things considered, didn't see the prior material. It's the new material added a little. Again, just this is all in hindsight. Like I feel like I'm able to pick out what was added in pretty well, but most of it adds positives. Just the fact that this creative team gave us a very technically sound film, a little not visually good without being too flashy, at least till you get to Death, in my opinion. But I would say both of them are pretty good. Why don't we give us some number rankings? I'll start out with a 6 out of 10 for Murder and a 5 out of 10 for Death. As concepts, not films. Wait, no, reverse.
I'm much more of a fan of people getting murdered than people just straight up dying.
It's the flair, really.
Yeah. I'd say 6 and 5. I would go with that's pretty much my thoughts as well. I mean, they're good movies. Murder mysteries are not like the kind of things that I preferentially seek out, but yeah, I enjoyed it.
I'd probably give Murder. I'd probably give that closer to like a, because I actually do really like murder mystery, so I'd probably give it a bit higher. So it's like I'd probably do Murder somewhere between 7 and 8, and Death on the Nile somewhere between 8 and 9, just because I was again very impressed with that mystery overall, and it was very. Found it very compelling and just a good story in general. So, but yeah, I enjoyed both. So hopefully they'll make another one, but we'll see.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah.
We shall see. I was just going to say, yeah, we'll see. And then we can break that down again as well.
That's right.
Yep. We can see where it goes into the timeline. Is it phase? Yeah. Are we in phase 1 or phase 2 of the?
Oh man! Oh, don't.
If you
will. Please no.
All right.
The ACMCU.
Oh yes, the ACMCU. You got to remember that. We're gonna put that on a T-shirt along with "Let There Be Carnage" Oscar nominated feature.
Yep,
that's right.
Jack, is there anything in terms of bookkeeping that we might need to know about for future episodes or anything like that?
Not off the top of my head. This coming Friday, we'll be having our first Background Bites episode, where we're going to be going through the Disney Renaissance films. And starting this week, we'll be talking about The Little Mermaid. So you can look forward to that. So that'll be fun. Aside from that, I don't think so. The only other thing I can think of is I know we've activated support now on for the podcast. So in the description, you'll see a place where you can go if you want to give us some cash or something.
That'd be really cool. But you don't
It would
have
be
to,
cool.
even though it would be cool.
No obligation. Oh, we did, Jack. We did. You said we had because next week we are doing our comic book read, right?
Correct.
Comic
So yeah,
book
we had a few people voting on the polls, and so it looks like we're going to, of the few of you that did vote, it looks like it ended up turning out to be Long Halloween and Dark Victory. So that looks like that's what we'll be talking about for our next Background Noise episode. So stay tuned for that.
If you don't want spoilers, go ahead and read those. Do your required reading ahead of time.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that'll about do it for this wonderful episode of Background Noise. As always, thank you very much for listening. And well, if you've been paying attention, thank you. If you have not, well, I understand you didn't miss much. And of course, make sure to keep out. Oh, I ruined it. Make sure to keep an eye out for things that are out of place. Anyway, goodbye.